less than 4 months removed from winning the first World Series in franchise history, it seems like Chris Young is expecting Rangers fans to lower their expectations, all because ownership is tightening the purse strings. On today's show, I'm talking about why ownership doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt after the last couple of years of tightening those purse strings, and what we've learned from the first week of spring training. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 10 seasons, including all 5 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into the Rangers' recent history of cheaping out on the purse strings, a little bit about what we've learned from spring training so far, and a little bit about a wild and wacky uniform debacle across Major League Baseball. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, it seems like the Rangers are not going to bring back Jordan Montgomery. I keep going back and forth of whether it's going to happen, whether it's not going to happen. It felt like an eventuality at the start of this offseason, and at this point, it's dragged on so long that I don't feel like there's almost any way that it is going to happen. I would be thrilled to be wrong. Absolutely over the moon to be proven wrong, and to have Jordan Montgomery back with the Texas Rangers in any capacity, whether it's a short-term deal, whether it's a long-term deal, whether it's a deal that feels like a bit of an overpay. At this point, it just has made too much sense for the entirety of this offseason to not happen. And yet, here we are on the day of the first spring training game, and no one signed Jordan Montgomery. It is honestly baffling to me with the amount of pitchers that have signed and the level of deals that have been signed, that Jordan Montgomery is somehow still on the market. And my comments about the Rangers lowering expectations, that come directly from Ken Rosenthal on Twitter yesterday when he was talking on foul territory or fair territory. I can't remember which one it is. It's what are the territories of his podcast. He was saying that it seems like Chris Young is almost cautioning Rangers fans to lower expectations because it seems like they have a set offer on what they are willing to offer Jordan Montgomery, and they are not going to budge from that number. Which I don't know what that number is. If I knew what that number was, I'd be able to feel more strongly one way or the other. But it feels like around 5 years is what some of the reporting has been, and around at least the $100 million mark. And if it's just 5 years, $100 million that the Rangers won't hit, then that feels bonkers to me. But I understand not wanting to pay everybody. I'm not asking for this ownership group to turn into the Dodgers, to go sign Shohei Ohtani for $700 million, and then follow it up with Yoshinobu Yamamoto with the most expensive free agent pitching contract in the history of Major League Baseball, and then go drop in, Teoscar Hernandez for $20 million for a year, and then go trade for and extend Tyler Glasnow. That's not what I'm asking from this ownership group. I'm simply asking to keep that payroll in at least the top 10, if not the top 5, because that's where this team should be in this competitive window. Now, staying in the luxury tax every single year is not feasible, and jumping into the Cohen zone is very difficult for most owners. They could all do it, but they're not going to. And that's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not asking for this team to suddenly turn into the Mets, where you go sign every free agent for oodles and oodles of money and extend everybody for lots and lots of money, but just stay in the zone of where you should be. because this is a competitive team at the peak of your competitive window, and you've already got a lot of money tied up in those big three free agent signings in DeGrom, Semien, and Seager. So you are committed to paying a lot of money to those three guys for at least the next 4 seasons for DeGrom, at least the next 5 seasons. I think it's 5 seasons left on Semien's contract, and another 8 seasons left on Seager's contract. So at this point, it's already a sunk cost that you're going to be a team that is spending a lot of money on those players. The amount that you're spending on other players as, ancillary pieces kind of depends. But eventually, the way these 10-year, 8-year, 7-year, even sometimes 5-year contracts go in free agency is by the back end, by those final years, those contracts are going to look ugly. Chances are at age 38, Corey Seager is probably not going to be a player whose WAR is equivalent to someone who should be making $32.5 million or whatever it is in the final year of that deal. By the time Marcus Semien's 38, actually I think he might age a little bit better at the age of 38 than Corey Seager because of how well he takes care of his body, and he might end up aging almost like Adrian Beltre. Not quite that level, but still, I don't think he's going to be a 7.5 WAR player at age 37, 38. That'd be magnificent, but that's probably not going to happen. So by tightening the purse strings in these years, and this is your championship window years, this is when you're supposed to be winning. This is why you've got those big contracts, why you've still got Max Scherzer, you still got Nathan Eovaldi, you still got Jacob deGrom. Theoretically, you can have him for a postseason run, which means you have a chance at a championship, as well as with this lineup being insane. You might as well go for it because you're already in the tax. So why not go just a little bit further into the tax? And let's look at where this payroll has been for the last couple of years. Because when Ray Davis first took over back in, I believe, 2011 was his first year as owner of the Rangers, through that time where the Rangers were a very, very prominent force, one of the best teams in baseball from 2010 to 2016, their payroll was up commensurate with where they should be. They're a winning team, they're a well-run team, and they were a team in a big market. All of that is still true right now. This is still a well-run team. This is a team that does not spend free agency dollars willy-nilly. They've got a young, cheap, controllable core, like they did back in 2010, like they thought they had in 2015 and 16, which didn't quite work out the way they thought. But they've definitely got a young, cheap, controllable core now with Langford, Carter, and Josh Young, all still pre-arbitration players that are, I'm pretty darn sure, at least all-star caliber. But this is where this payroll has been in the last couple of years, because I've seen a lot of talk about how, the Rangers are taking their payroll to unprecedented heights this year. Well, that's not true. That's not true in terms of the rankings and in terms of the overall dollars at this point, at least according to SpotTrack's numbers. Right now, the Rangers' payroll sits at $216 million, which is the seventh highest payroll in Major League Baseball. That's fine. That's a solid, serviceable, acceptable number. As long as this team is in the top 10, that is where they should be, especially during this competitive window. You have got to keep your payroll in the top 10. You are in too big of a market. You are too good of a team. You have too wide of a spread to not be in that top 10, especially when you are in the middle of your competitive window. Last year, that payroll was all the way up to $251 million, which had them as the 4th highest payroll in Major League Baseball. Now, $251 million is a lot more than $216 million. Last time I did the math, I'm pretty sure 251 is bigger than 216, which means that the payroll this year is not at unprecedented heights. And even if they signed Jordan Montgomery to, say, some crazy deal, say he's making $30 million a year, that payroll is still smaller this year than it was last year. Now, let's look back at 2022, when the payroll jumped up tremendously because they signed all those two big free agent money market signings, $150 million, 15th in the league. which was below league average at $150 million even. That was below league average payroll. Then you look at 2021, a team that had year 2 of the new stadium. It was the roughest year of this team, the main teardown. This is going to be a bad team year of the rebuild. The 1 year of the full-on, true-on rebuild intentionally. $96 million payroll. $96 million. That was 20th. That's near the bottom third of the league as one of the at least top 5, if not top 3 biggest media markets. I mean, it's New York, it's LA, and with the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and how far the TV contract extends, they might be bigger than Chicago's media market. Not entirely sure. They might be bigger than that, though. I'm pretty sure they're bigger than Houston, which, I mean, I think at worst, this team, the DFW, is the 5th biggest media market. So, coming up, we'll look at the rest of these years and why it's still a trend that the Rangers need to continue, why they need to bend on what they're willing to give Jordan Montgomery, and a little bit about what we've learned from this first week of spring training. But after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Backblaze, our newest sponsor. What is Backblaze? It's an online storage cloud that provides foundation for businesses, developers, IT professionals, and individuals to build applications, host content, manage media, backup and archive data, and more. With over 3 billion gigabytes of data storage under management, Backblaze currently works with over 500,000 customers in over 175 different countries. If that sounds good to you, you can get the unlimited cloud backup for your Mac or PC for just $99 a year. And if you have a business, it works on multiple workstations and offers 1-year file retention and version history. Even better, Backblaze has restored over 55 billion files for customers. You can also get your hand on a hard drive restored by mail or shipped to your door. To receive a fully featured no-risk trial, go to backblaze.com/lockedonmlb. It'll give you plenty of time to upload and download some files. Seriously, back up your stuff. Again, go to backblaze.com/lockedonmlb, sign up for a free trial, and see why the New York Times, Inc., Time Magazine, and Tom's Guide have all recommended Backblaze. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. We'll be back later after the Rangers' first spring training game to talk about what we learned from that first spring training game. It is here. We finally made it to the day of that first spring training game. And now, I did want to make one last point about the Rangers and their money issues, non-issues, whatever is going on there, because I understand a little bit, slightly understanding, of this Rangers team being cautious, being very cautious about what they're going to do with this updated TV contract situation. It is where they get most of their money. It is where they get most of their revenue. Usually $111 million was the guarantee in the deal, that they signed back in 2010, 2011, whenever that was. It was about $111 million a year, and it was supposed to go through, I believe, 2032, or it was a long time, and it was supposed to keep going for several more years. And we'll see if the Rangers end up sticking with Bally next year. They're getting not nearly as much as they expected this year, but acting like they're going to get zero money from this new TV revenue deal, whatever is going on with this new TV revenue, whether they go with just Major League Baseball hosting their games, whether they go through some other regional sports network, whether they want to partner with NBC to put an NBC Sports here, or AT&T Sports, or whatever one of the many different options that there are for the Rangers to go with next year. I feel like they're acting like this is going to be no revenue for them, or is going to be like half the revenue that they were getting. And I just feel like that's absolutely ridiculous, absolutely ludicrous, because while there's not as much money in cable TV now as there was back in 2011 or 2010, just the 2010s in general, when these deals were signed, there's still plenty of money there, and there's still plenty of people that are willing to pay. And if you can make it easier for them to access this content, I can't imagine if Major League Baseball would make it so that the teams are making less money when more people are viewing their product. That just does not make any business sense. But back to the points about the payroll. This back in 2023, that was the first time that this team had been top 10 in payroll since 2017, which was the year that the playoff drought started. You notice a trend? All of these middle road to middle bottom third of the league in payroll with this team missing the playoffs. It's not completely unrelated. It's not the only thing. It's not just spend money, you're guaranteed to have a good team. Obviously, you had to spend well and spend smartly, but that's what this Rangers team did to win the World Series. They identified a gap in what the league thought was valuable. The teams around Major League Baseball were not spending on good players in free agency. They were hesitant to hand out these big contracts. And the Rangers saw that as a market inefficiency, and they pounced on it, which is why they won the World Series just 2 years after losing 100 games. Because they said, oh, no one's going to pay Corey Seager to be on their baseball team for 10 years, $325 million? Done. Oh, y'all think this guy who just finished third in MVP voting, Marcus Semien, won a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger in his first year at a new position? Y'all think he's not worth the free agent money? Okay, well, we do. So here's a big old chunk of change, Marcus Semien. Oh, y'all think this Jacob deGrom guy isn't going to be worth the money? Well, we're going to take a risk. It didn't quite work out. We're going to sign about 100 other pitchers to back that up because the rest of these pitchers are not going signed at all. So we're going to take that risk and we are going to go and pounce in free agency. And if they don't pounce next year, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt for this 1 year. I'm cautious in giving them the benefit of the doubt for this 1 year, only because there was a World Series championship for my favorite team for the first time ever just a few months ago. But if the same thing happens next year, if they're still pointing to, oh, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the TV contract. Oh, we're not sure if we're going to make any money at all. Oh, us poor billionaire owners who make insane amounts of money off of Major League Baseball. We're not so sure how much we're going to make off of this. Not to mention the profits they already had from that massive TV deal and from all of those years while the Rangers were bad to mediocre to bad again, where they were not paying what their payroll probably should have been for a team with this size market, this size, media market. They're not, if not going to invest that, then what the heck are we doing owning a baseball team, Mr. Ray Davis? What is the point of those billions of dollars? Are you going to buy an extra luxury yacht that you're going to take the rest of us on? Because I'd rather you spend that money on something for the community, for North Texas, for Texas in general, and parts of New Mexico, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and wherever else Texas Rangers fans happen to be. That's the whole point of being rich. The whole point of being an owner is to unload that piggy bank for some good baseball players to show off your fancy baseball franchise that is winning games. Because I don't know about you, Mr. Ray Davis, but I liked my team winning games a whole lot more than being mediocre to bad to embarrassing that they were for the last half decade before this past season. Now, coming up, we're going to look at what you should look for, the important things to watch for in a Major League spring training game/games, and a little bit of talk about the talk of the town in spring training, which are these hilariously bad uniforms. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. If you wanted to bet on some baseball bets that are starting up, they've got American League Rookie of the Year odds right now. Evan Carter is the favorite to win American League Rookie of the Year. Or if you're thinking, actually, I think Wyatt Langford is actually going to be the American League Rookie of the Year. He is the third favorite. In between them, of course, is the shortstop prospect, Jackson Holliday for the Baltimore Orioles. I think the Rangers have a pretty good shot at winning American League Rookie of the Year. It's going to be an interesting race, especially with two of the top three guys on this Rangers squad, this reigning Rangers World Series squad, showing how bright the future and present is for the Rangers. So if you want to bet on those odds or anything else, basketball, baseball, whatever you are wanting to bet on, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. Back on Monday to talk about what happened in this weekend games and maybe some news and notes from around what is happening around Major League Baseball. If we get any interesting news happening this weekend, like maybe a Jordan Montgomery signing with the Rangers. I digress. Anyway, Rangers' first spring training game is here. We finally made it. It is today, this afternoon. If you're listening to this in the morning, or it already happened if you're listening to this at night. But we have finally made it to the first spring training game, the most important game of the season. So much to be learned, so much to be gleaned, so many things happening, all of them very important. Well, actually, I kind of lied about that. It is the first spring training game, and there's not a whole lot that can be gleaned from those first spring training games, other than, okay, this guy's here, first looks at new guys in uniform, hopefully a first look at Wyatt Langford in a Texas Rangers uniform in an actual game, except by look, I mean listen, because there is no TV broadcast for this game, but at least there is a radio broadcast. Now there'll be a few pitchers pitching in this game, mostly just one inning, because that's how these first spring training games go. There's not a whole lot of innings to be pitched early on. Pitchers are still building back up. And since there's not a whole lot of data on these guys or in any of these spring training games, which I find very frustrating, because the main thing that I look for in a spring training game is what's up with the starting pitchers and their velocity. How much are they getting built back up? How close are they to being, about where they should be on the radar gun? That's when you're starting to know, okay, these guys are starting to feel, more like they are in mid-season form of, kind of just scouting a little bit by the radar gun. And unfortunately, in these spring training stadiums, which I don't really understand why this hasn't happened at this point, I don't understand why there's not, every spring training game televised, or at least have a radio broadcast for it, why all of these spring training facilities don't have the, StatCast pitch tracker data so I can get on game day on MLB app and track every single pitch and at least have the velocities. You just kind of have to rely on what the beat writers are tweeting. You got to kind of hope that there are enough media members there and enough of them are looking at the radar gun at the right time to see, all right, how close to getting built up are these guys? What kind of, pitches are they throwing? And with Dane Dunning starting this game, I think the main thing I'm looking for with Dane Dunning is that he is throwing a new pitch. He is throwing, I believe it is a splitter, as he is calling it, and he is hoping to use it a little bit more effectively against lefties. That was one of the things that caught up to him later on in the year when he was starting to get hit a little bit harder. He was not able to be as effective against left-handed hitters as he was earlier on in the season. Now, I believe Dane Dunning already has a changeup, a circle changeup. So adding a splitter onto that, I'm not sure if that's going to replace his changeup, because usually you use that against off-handed players. As a righty, you throw that against lefties to keep them off balance. But he's already got a sinker that moves away from left-handed hitters. He's also got that four-seam fastball. I mean, he's got a lot of pitches. He's got 6 pitches at this point. I think the splitter, if he doesn't show the circle change, then that's a 7th pitch. And that is a very, very crafty guy. But we'll see several pitchers in this game, starting with Dane Dunning. We might get 2 innings worth of Cody Bradford. Shout out to Cody Bradford, World Series champion. Happy belated birthday to Cody Bradford, whose birthday was this week. We'll also see lefty Danny Duffy, who is back with the Rangers on a minor league deal after basically rehabbing all season last year. He pitched a little bit in winter ball this past winter, and he was building back up to be just a bullpen arm last year after missing most of the last 2 seasons. He is back to being a starter. Hopefully some starter depth. We'll see what's happening there. We'll also see a little bit of Jack Leiter. We'll see a little bit of Antoine Kelly for an inning, Mark Church, Zach Kent, and Yeri Rodriguez. That is the plan for now. Nathan Eovaldi is going to be, I think, Saturday is when we'll see him for the first time. And I will be all eyes and ears on Nathan Eovaldi, just making sure that he gets through the spring, not only just healthy, but also fully ready for opening day is pretty much the most important thing I think that I'm going to be looking for at all this entire spring training is just, all right, how's Nathan Eovaldi feeling? How's the elbow? How's the shoulder? How's the everything? What's the velocity look like? What does the stuff look like? Is he feeling good? Is he feeling like he is hitting his spots? Is everything going right for Nathan Eovaldi? Same thing can be said for all the other starting pitchers. Outside of Dunning and Bradford, I'm not worried about them being healthy come opening day. I'm not really worried about their velocity being so much where we're hoping it to be. But with Eovaldi, we saw when he was hurt at times last year and when the velocity was down, it made a big difference in his effectiveness. Because when Nate Eovaldi is sitting 91 to 95, he's a little bit more hittable than when he's, 93 to 97, like he was at the playoffs. It just makes a big, big difference in his repertoire and how it plays off of everything else. That fastball is very, very good. So is the splitter and the curveball, and a little bit the cutter as well. But if that fastball is a lot slower and everything else is coming out of the hand a lot slower, and it's much more difficult for Eovaldi to be effective. So mainly the goal is just, can everybody stay healthy on the pitching side and get to opening day ready, fully healthy, or at least like 85% of themselves. Just healthy mainly. That's the first and foremost focus because of the lack of depth in the starting rotation behind, starter number 5 and Cody Bradford. Just get those guys healthy and like up to like 85, 95, 90% game effectiveness from opening day. Usually it takes a couple turns through the rotation for those starting pitchers to be, fully at peak midseason form because it just takes a while for those guys to get all the way ramped up. But on the hitting side, there's not always a whole lot you can learn from these hitters in spring training. The main thing you kind of look for, or at least that I was looking for last offseason, or last spring training, I should say, is Adolis Garcia talking a lot about how he is working on being more patient in the approach. Changes to the approach, those are things that you can see a little bit more in spring training on the hitters. Usually, those kind of manifest themselves pretty well in spring training. We saw a lot more walks from Adolis Garcia in spring training last year. That was a great sign, and it ended up paying dividends in the regular season. It doesn't always happen like that, because I remember almost every spring training we'd hear from Rougned Odor. This is the year that Rougned Odor is going to be a lot more patient. He's hitting very well in spring training. He's working more walks. He's not chasing out of the strike zone and just selling out for power. And then every regular season, we'd say, oh, nope, Rougned Odor's back to his Rougned Odor self. But last year with Adolis Garcia's changes, we saw that implemented in spring training and really show up in a big way for that breakout season last year. And we saw how incredibly good he was during the regular season and how in the postseason it just took it to a whole new level. I'm going to be watching really closely on Ezekiel Duran, what he's doing in spring training this year, especially since he's going to be playing a lot of shortstop and probably a lot of third base as well, with Josh Young still out for a few more weeks and with Corey Seager missing most of spring training. We're looking at him and Josh Smith, seeing what they're doing. And, well, obviously, I think we're all going to be very eager to see what Wyatt Langford does in spring training. I feel like this is going to unfairly make or break whether he makes the opening day roster. I don't think that is a guaranteed thing at this point. I feel like 95% confident he is going to be at least having an opening day roster spot, if not an everyday spot in the lineup, which I feel like if he's not going to be every day in the lineup in the big league level, then he's going to be back down at AAA, just getting those reps, because he is too talented a player to not be giving him everyday reps. He is still very young, still has a decent amount to prove, but I'm excited to see him hit some dingers off big league pitchers in spring training, because I anticipate we're going to see at least one or two, or at least some very well stung balls from his bat, because that dude can absolutely mash. I'll also be looking at what he looks like defensively in the outfield. He's still, relatively new to the outfield. He did play a couple years at Florida in the outfield primarily, played almost exclusively left field in the minor leagues last year. He's still trying to learn the position. He's very athletic, but his routes are still a little bit erratic, and you can kind of tell a little bit more about, an outfielder's, defensive chops from watching them in spring training. That is a thing that is going to carry over. That is a thing that is an important storyline for not only spring training, but also for Wyatt Langford's development in general, and how high his ceiling can be. I'm in the camp that thinks he could be a decent to very good defensive left fielder. And I'm also in the camp that thinks his bat's so stinking good, it doesn't freaking matter if he is a tomato out there in the outfield, which he's not going to be. He's too athletic to be just absolutely horrendous in the outfield. Yeah, the routes are a little bit raw at this point. The arm isn't Adolis Garcia level. That's fine. It doesn't need to be. The routes don't need to be, elite crisp, because he is still in left field, which is probably the least important defensive position in baseball. I mean, it is probably the fewest outs. It is not a position where you stick, oh yeah, that guy's got a premium glove in left field. I mean, you can count on like one hand the amount of times you hear that. The only time I remember hearing that really was when Josh Hamilton was playing left field because of Julio Bourbon or whoever it was in center field at the time that was taking over for Josh Hamilton, pushing him to left field. So those are things I'm looking for in this spring training game one. I am so excited to just have baseball back, having baseball on my television this afternoon, just watching the Dodgers drop an 8 spot on the Padres and having the broadcast talk about how, oh yeah, guys, remember the last baseball game that was played? It was when the Rangers won the World Series, getting multiple Rangers World Series mentions on a Dodgers-Padres spring training broadcast. It's just absolutely delightful. Spring training is back. Games are back. We finally made it. And hopefully, by the time I talk to y'all next, we'll have some positive news about a wonderful opening spring training game. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.